Gut health is real, guys, especially when confronted with chronic illnesses like diabetes, cancer, heart diseases, respiratory disease, and add on is chronic mental disorders. All of these have been linked to degraded gut health, not just because of poor eating habits, especially ultra processed foods, but also because the medical fraternity's disregard to the importance of gut health. Honestly, if you visit a doctor for depression, does he or she ask how and what have you been eating?
Where's your diet here?
Alex Dudley did not come to mental health research through academia or medicine. He came to it through love. In 2013, he met the woman who would later become his wife, someone living with severe treatment-resistant bipolar 1 disorder. Despite her illness, she was sharp, funny, compassionate, and deeply alive. Alex fell in love quickly, but it wasn't until about a year into their relationship when he witnessed her first psychotic episode that he truly understood the scale of what bipolar disorder meant. Now, watching someone you love slip away from reality, followed by a crushing darkness of depression, leaves a mark. For Alex, that experience became the catalyst for a relentless search for answers. By training, Alex is an ecologist. He had no medical background, but he understood something fundamental. The human body is not a collection of isolated parts. When conventional psychiatric treatments failed to help his wife, he did what came naturally. He turned to scientific literature. He began reading peer-reviewed research late into the night, looking not for miracle cures, but for mechanisms. He wanted to understand what depression and bipolar disorder actually were at a biological level. During this search, Alex encountered a paper that would change everything. Titled Transferring the Blues, Depression-Associated Gut Microbiota Induces Neurobehavioral Changes in the Rat. The study showed something extraordinary. What makes Transferring the Blues paper so profoundly relevant, far more than any biomedical studies I read or even conducted myself, is its direct relationship to real living systems. Much of the traditional biomedical research, including work I was involved earlier in my career, relied on isolating a single compound and testing it on a cell line. While such approaches have value, they fundamentally fail to capture how living organisms actually function. Human biology does not operate in isolation. Organs, microbes, immune responses, and neurochemistry work in constant synchrony. A purified compound acting on a single cell type cannot meaningfully represent that complexity. This is precisely where the Transferring the Blues study breaks from convention. Instead of testing a molecule on cell lines, the researchers transferred entire fecal microbiota from humans diagnosed with depression into microbiota deficient rats using oral garbage. These rats were specifically bred or treated to lack a normal gut microbial ecosystem, making them an ideal model to observe how an introduced microbiome alone could influence behavior and neurochemistry. Crucially, the researchers did not isolate or target individual bacterial strains. They transferred the entire microbial consortium, the full ecological system contained within the human fecal matter. This meant that thousands of microbial species, the metabolites, signaling molecules, and microbial interactions were introduced simultaneously, closely mimicking how microbiota function in real life. What followed was remarkable. Rats receiving microbiota from depressed humans began exhibiting depression-like behaviors along with measurable neurochemical changes. This approach moves research out of an artificial reductionist framework and into a systems-level biological reality. Instead of asking how one compound affects one cell type, the study asks how an entire living ecosystem influences another living organism, That is why the findings are so powerful and why they can be meaningfully extrapolated to real-world human health. It demonstrates in a biological coherent way that mental states are not confined to brain alone, but can be transmitted through the gut microbiome. This finding carried profound implications, not just for the sake of peer-reviewed publication, but also in terms of communicating the findings to ordinary literate people in our society. People like Alex, who knows just the basics of biology and reading scientific papers, understood the significance of the study and hence was convinced with the study outcomes. The paper concluded that depression might not be purely a disorder of the brain, but one that could be driven or at least strongly influenced by the gut. Coming back to the story, for Alex, this was the aha moment. If gut microbes could induce depressive behavior in healthy animals, what role might they be playing in severe chronic mood disorders in humans? What if bipolar disorder, at least in some cases, was not originating solely in the brain, but in a dysregulated biological system rooted in the gut? The more Alex read, the more the pieces began to fit. The gut is home to trillions of microbes that regulate immune function, inflammation, metabolism, and even the production of neurotransmitter precursors such as serotonin and dopamine. The gut communicates directly with the brain through neural, immune, and hormonal pathways, what scientists now call the gut-brain axis. Increasingly, research was showing that disturbances in this system could influence mood, cognition, and stress responses.
Remember, these bacteria in your gut not only do this mischief, but they also affect the enteric nervous system of your gut. What is the enteric nervous system? It's the second largest brain you got. The neurons, the number of neurons in your brain is the highest. Second highest is in your gut. So this is the nervous system in the wall of your gut. And hopefully, if it's working properly, it keeps the movement in one direction. But more importantly than that also, is that these are vagus nerve connections that go to your brain. Chemicals in your gut and in your wall can actually go up the vagus nerve and go into your brain. It can also get into your bloodstream through your liver and then get into your brain this way. So when you think something or feel something, it may not be you. Just I want you to think about this. You see, we think it's all about us. I'm saying that if you have mental fog or if you have depression, who's depressed? Because I've seen this in my patients. We fix this and they come back very happy, and I'm saying, is he really happy now because he found an answer to all this stuff? Is that why he's happy, or is he happy because his neurotransmitters from his dysfunctional gut has now gone down and his brain is better? And we know that depression also is an inflammatory condition.
Mental health, Alex realized, might be inseparable from what could be called mental immunity, and immunity begins in the gut. Fecal microbiota transplantation, or FMT, had already been proven effective for severe gastrointestinal infections like recurrent Clostridioides difficile. In those cases, restoring a healthy microbial ecosystem could succeed where antibiotics failed. To Alex, FMT was not a bizarre or mystical idea. It was an ecological intervention, replacing a damaged ecosystem with a functional one. The concept itself was simple, even if the execution was confronting. And while it sounded unpleasant, biology does not care about disgust. It cares about function. At the time, Alex's wife had exhausted virtually every conventional psychiatric option available. Medications had failed. Hospitalizations had become routine. Her suffering was relentless and severe. There were no approved microbiome-based treatments for psychiatric illnesses and access to clinical fecal microbiota transplantation, FMT. Compounding this, Alex's wife later reflected that she had been prescribed repeated courses of high-dose antibiotics over several consecutive years to treat chronic tonsillitis and glandular fever. In hindsight, this prolonged antibiotic exposure would almost certainly have devastated her gut microbiota, disrupting the diverse microbial ecosystem now known to be essential for gut-brain communication and mental health. Taken together, these factors left few remaining options. Confronted with this reality and guided by emerging scientific evidence, Alex and his wife made a decision born not of recklessness but of desperation. With their psychiatrist kept fully informed, though understandably cautious, they chose to attempt a do-it-yourself fecal microbiota transplant.
You take the poo, you put it in the blender, you mix in some saline solution, you whiz it up a little bit, and then head down, bum up the bum, squeeze it in.
Nothing happened at first. Then they tried again and again. In total, 9 attempts were made. For months, there were no clear signs that anything had changed. Then one morning, Alex's wife woke up with a sensation she hadn't felt in years. A lightness, a quiet sense of well-being, to a level where she started asking herself in great denial, "Do I feel good?" That day marked the end of her depression. In the years that followed, she gradually came off psychiatric medication under medical supervision. Aside from one brief relapse linked to extreme external stresses, her bipolar symptoms disappeared entirely. By September 2017, she experienced what would become her final episode. She has remained symptom-free ever since. Her psychiatrist, stunned by the outcome, later documented the case in the Australian and New Zealand Journal of Psychiatry. What had begun as a desperate experiment had become a published medical anomaly. The significance of the story, however, lies not in encouraging imitation. FMT is not a benign procedure. In clinical settings, donor screening is extraordinarily strict, often more rigorous than blood or organ donation. Donors are screened for infectious diseases, metabolic disorders, immune conditions, psychiatric history, antibiotic resistance, and lifestyle risk factors. Only a small fraction of people qualify. Without this screening, FMT can transmit life-threatening infections, antibiotic-resisting organisms, metabolic diseases, immune dysfunction, psychiatric symptoms, sepsis, and in documented cases, death. DIY FMT is dangerous and strongly discouraged. What this story does demonstrate is something else entirely, that gut microbiome can profoundly influence mental health, and that psychiatry may be standing at the edge of a paradigm shift. Since Alex's wife's discovery, similar remissions have been observed in other cases, including within her own family. In 2025, Australia's leading bipolar researcher, Professor Gordon Parker, published a gut mood solution outlining the scientific basis for microbiome-focused interventions in mood disorders. Research centers such as Deakin University's Food and Mood Center now have clinical trials ready to go, awaiting funding. This is not a story about fecal transplants. It is a story about systems biology, about following evidence wherever it leads, and about questioning long-held assumptions. The brain does not function in isolation. Food, microbes, immunity, and mood are inseparably linked, and while this story should never inspire dangerous self-experimentation, it should inspire urgency, because for people living with treatment-resistant mental illnesses, understanding the gut may one day mean the difference between surviving and truly living. Like I mentioned earlier, DIY FMT is not at all encouraged. Studies are underway to come up with safe protocols for FMT to work with minimal side effects. However, I have good news for you. There are other safer and sustainable ways to improve your gut microbiota. If you or your loved ones are convinced with microbiota playing a critical role in brain health, then here are some logical steps you can take to restore healthy microbiota. Reduce the consumption of sugary foods and drinks. Reduce your dependency on ultra-processed foods. particularly the ones with marketed long shelf life. Consume cooked food from raw ingredients as against highly processed ingredients. Ensure nutritional balance for every meal you consume. Give attention to probiotics like yogurts in your diet. Eat when you're hungry. Have a 6 to 7 hours of fasting window between meals. Remember, a healthy gut equates to a healthy brain. Like and subscribe for more contents like this.